African Hall at the California Academy of Sciences. So these penguins are found in South Africa and off the coast of Namibia. And they live in an environment that actually looks pretty similar to what you see here. This is modeled on a real beach in South Africa called Boulders Beach. Now, when people looked at this exhibit, did you expect maybe to see some ice and snow for these penguins? Maybe. So a lot of penguins do live in those really cold environments, but not all of them do. So for African penguins, their temperatures are actually pretty similar to what we see in coastal California. Nice and moderate, a little bit warm. There's about 17 species of penguin, and they all live south of the equator. Now, African penguins are endangered, so we're going to learn a little bit about the reasons why and what we all can do to help. And we're going to be talking with our biologist to do so. My name is Siobhan, and I'll be your presenter. Are you all ready to meet our biologist? Yeah? Okay, I'd like to introduce everyone to Steve. Good morning, Steve.
Good morning, Siobhan. Hi, everyone.
Hi. So I was letting our visitors know that this is kind of a special morning for these penguins today. What are our penguins getting today?
Well, before their breakfast, they are going to get some Valentines. We'll see if anyone...
Cue all the awes. We had a lot of awes go on in the audience. Why are we giving them Valentine's today?
Obviously because it's Valentine's, but these guys... these little pieces of felt and fabric, these guys actually use them to line their nests. And these are this is nesting material for them. This is actually breeding season for these guys. So they will take them back to their little nest boxes and line their nest with them.
So their nest boxes are the cave-like areas that you see towards the back of the rocks here. And so the nesting material is an enrichment for them. So out in the wild, they would build their own nests. They would create them a lot of times using their guano. Does anyone know what guano is? It's poop. Yeah, bird poop. So we give them these materials so that they can still get that feeling for creating their nests, making it nice and comfortable. I have to say it's pretty adorable seeing these penguins carrying hearts around in their mouths. And Steve, you said that it's breeding season. We actually have another kind of special announcement to tell our guests today.
We do. We are officially announcing that we have a couple of penguin chicks in our nest boxes right now.
So we had 2 baby penguins that hatched about 2 weeks ago. And so they'll go through a process off exhibit where they get bonded and learn how to swim with the help of their parents, and then they'll be out on exhibit at some point in the future. So an extra special announcement for Valentine's Day. So as you can see, some of these penguins are taking those hearts and then they're taking them to their nests. When they put them in their nest, Steve, what do? Do they lay them down on the bottom there?
They do. In the wild, they would not be picking up things like leaves and pieces of seaweed and nesting because they're obviously nesting on either the ground or in these caves. So when they're laying their eggs, they want to give that a little bit of cushion. So that's what these are for. Here we use pieces of felt because they're easier to clean.
Now, there's a couple penguins that are kind of going for a swim here. They don't seem to be interested. So is it just that some penguins like to have nesting materials and others don't?
There are definitely some penguins that are more hoarders. The green pair, you can see they keep coming back from. They definitely, when you open up their nest box, it is usually lined full of nesting material. Though often you can see some clam shells on the bottom that we fed to the sea stars. They go down and collect clam shells. You find all sorts of things in their nest box.
So they do like their territory, those nest boxes. Sometimes they might actually even steal some materials from another penguin. They will get into little disputes about that. So you might see a penguin making some calls. They might lift their head up, and the calls that they make sound like a donkey's bray, like a hee-haw. So these penguins are also referred to as beach donkeys as well. You might see them flapping their wings a little bit or looking back and forth at each other. These are all ways that they communicate. So you might see a little of that going on today with these Valentines, but it seems pretty civil. It seems like everyone's taking their Valentines and taking them back to their nests on their own.
They usually are. I think they know who's a little bit more protective of each other, and I think they know that there's plenty of it. You can see they've kind of taken them and then drop them on the ground. So they're not, they've probably got a bunch of nesting material in their boxes already.
And Steve, there's a penguin right here that's coming out from behind the log that looks like it has a special Valentine's costume or dress on. What's going on with this penguin that's running away?
That is Pomona. She's going through her molt right now. She's actually a little bit late. Molting season usually doesn't overlap nesting season, because usually during nesting season, the adult penguins need to be able to go out and fish to be able to feed their chicks. So not being able to swim would not be a good time to have it. But Pomona is going through her annual molt, and it is called a catastrophic molt because it does look pretty gnarly. She's definitely having a bad feather day.
So it looked like that penguin was kind of running back towards you to get another heart, but maybe not interested. But you mentioned the name of a penguin. How do we know who's who in this exhibit?
Well, you notice that the penguins are wearing a little bit of jewelry. You can see Homie here has a blue band on her left wing. Every penguin does have a band. The boys have them on their right wing. The girls have them on their left. So this tells you that Homie is a female. You can happen to see her mate is Tux there. He's in the water with the blue band on his right wing. So any bird when they have matching wing bands, that means that they're a bonded pair.
So the males are banded on the right, the females are banded on the left. If you see two penguins with the same color band, that means that they're a bonded pair. Now, Steve, how do they meet their mate when they live in a museum or a zoo or something like that?
Well, we always, whenever we have a new penguin, we do put them through a quarantine for a couple reasons. One, to make sure that they're healthy, because we wouldn't want to bring in a penguin with an illness and introduce it to our current colony. And so usually that quarantine period lasts about a month. And during that time, we usually know who that penguin is going to be bonded with because of a species survival plan, which we'll probably talk about later. And so during that period of quarantine, their potential mate is quarantined with them. So they spend day and night for that 30 days, and during that time they usually will pair bond.
So they're basically introduced to one another at zoos and aquariums, and it's part of that species survival plan that Steve was talking about. So this is really crucial for the health of the penguins that you find in zoos and aquariums, and we're actually part of a network that works together. So sometimes we might even trade penguins. We might send a penguin to another zoo, or we might get one, all so that we can keep their genetic line nice and diverse, nice and healthy, keep this population in good health. Now, it looks like we're switching to our feeding portion of the program. Steve, what are you feeding these penguins this morning?
These penguins are seabirds, and so their main diet is fish. And I have a couple different types of fish here. The larger one here, which is black on the back and silvery bellied, is called a herring. And then I also have a smaller fish, which is called a capelin.
All right, so do you all think that this is what they would be eating out in the wilds? You think that's the same kind of fish? No, you're right. Yeah, so we're feeding them alternative fish here at the Academy because it's more sustainable. So what they eat out in the wild is sardines and anchovies. Has anyone ever heard of that fish before? Those fish? Yeah, so that's a pretty common fish for humans to eat. But what's been happening in recent history is that humans have been fishing them and fishing them and fishing them, and we ended up overfishing them. And so that means that there's not very much out in the wild for these penguins to eat. So we're feeding them sustainable seafood, which means an alternative choice that we're trying to help to keep those wild resources for them available. And so you can actually help with this effort as well. You can download the Seafood Watch app, or you can get a card from me after the program, and that will help you to make sustainable seafood choices when you're out and about in your daily life. We feed all of our animals here at the Academy sustainable seafood. If you go to the cafe today to get lunch and you get seafood there, that's all sustainable too. So that's one great way that we can help African penguins. Steve, I mentioned mentioned earlier that they are endangered. So one of the things we've been seeing is this decline in their food resources. Is there anything else that's been contributing to that endangered status that they have?
Well, they do live in South Africa, and the South African, the Cape of Good Hope is actually a main shipping line. And so unfortunately one of the things they do have to deal with on occasion are oil spills. And with their feathers being that the way they are, oil would actually destroys that waterproofing, and so they're not able to swim and hunt for their fish if they're caught in that oil spill. So that is one of the things that they do have to deal with in their wild habitat.
So they do have a protective coating on their feathers, as Steve mentioned. So when you see these penguins swimming around in the water, you'll see some bubbles coming, kind of trailing behind them. That's actually air escaping from their 2 layers of feathers. Then on top of that 2 layers, they actually waterproof it with an oil gland at the base of their tail. So when they go through the molt, like that penguin that we saw that looked like it had some fluffy feathers around its neck, they can't go in the water during that time. But also if there's an oil spill and it gets onto them, that can actually make it really hard for them to put their own oil on their feathers and keep them waterproof during that time. So that's another thing that's kind of been going on with them. But we are partnering with an organization that actually helps African penguins, and it works in South Africa a lot of times with the chicks. This is called Sandcob. Steve, what do they do?
Well, Sandcob is an organization that specializes in not just penguins, but they do work with a lot of seabirds, so gulls and like cormorants that are found in South Africa, and they will basically rehabilitate them. So, for instance, we talked about oil spills. If they find they have animals that are affected by oil spills, they'll bring them in, clean them up, make sure that they're healthy, and then they'll re-release them back into the wild. You mentioned how they work with chicks. You also mentioned how one of the problems in the wild is that because they're running low on food, so the parents, when they're not able to find enough food to feed their chicks, the chicks don't develop as quickly as they need to. So unfortunately, sometimes they're being abandoned, and so Sandcob goes and rescues those abandoned chicks, feeds them up with all of their volunteers, and then make sure that they're healthy, and then they tag them and then re-release them.
You can actually contribute to Sandcob if you go to our Penny Crusher by our Lab Junior store. You can get a souvenir to take home, and also proceeds go to Sandcob. So that's a great way to help African penguins out in the wild. All right, well, we've had a lot of activity in here this morning with giving them Valentines and feeding them and learning a lot about them. So I want to see if anybody has any questions they'd like to ask. Any questions out there? Any questions or curiosities? Not yet. Okay. So I think we had 14 penguins, and now with the addition of the 2 chicks, do we have a total of 16 penguins in this exhibit?
We do.
Total of 16 penguins. All right. Do we have any questions that came up for people? No? Okay. Well, I'm going to stick around for a few minutes. If you have any questions, you can come on up to me. You can also get a seafood watch card if you're interested. But Steve, I want to thank you so much for giving them Valentines and talking with us and feeding them. Thank you, Steve.
Thanks, everyone.
Have a great day, everyone.